I had a thought that I will try to be much more brief than I was in my previous video, but expanding on the same idea. And it really comes out of this idea that if Christ is supposed to be king over everything and in all things, including our social institutions, then what would a Christian approach to credit be? Credit ratings or credit scores, or as they work. Kind of this goes into the whole realm of finances, which obviously has tremendous power in our society. And currently, if you have good credit is a sign that you perform well financially along a certain set of criteria. And what it rewards is not necessarily good biblical use of money, although you probably would have a high credit score if you did everything correctly. But what it actually rewards most of all is people who will be lifelong and consistent, reliable users of debt. And it's actually like the ideal is not to have your credit cards with no balance. It's to have them with 30% balance and to just keep them there forever. That's obviously not like the best way financially for your long-term future, to constantly be paying interest to these corporations. But that's really what they reward you for. And the credit rating companies, that's what they look for. They look to tell credit companies and other financial institutions who they will be able to make a lifetime of money off of. If you're too erratic, you get a bad score if you don't pay your bills. But you can also be incredibly frugal and wise and not have good credit. I have a friend who had a difficult time buying a house because he stopped using credit cards and they couldn't really locate a credit score for him, even though he had a very good paying job and lots of money in savings, more than adequate for a down payment on a house. But he wasn't playing the right rules and the right games. And a lot of people who are Christians will look to somebody like Dave Ramsey for financial advice. And Dave Ramsey helps Christians get out of the predatory credit schemes, helps them not to be trapped in, the really bad place of having maxed out credit cards and paying the minimums every month. Like, that's the worst situation you can be in. Credit card companies don't like that as much because there's more of a chance you'll just say screw it and stop paying completely. That's why they love that 30% balance. But Dave Ramsey, he's still working within this system, and what in his investment, he's a big guy on stocks, telling people to invest in stocks. Well, we've had stock market crashes, and we could in the future, and I think he likes mutual funds or something. I don't know. But the point is that all of these financial institutions are things that we do perceive to be part of a neutral world, which there is no such thing. We realize that in the regard to state, but it's also in all these other things. And so, as I was thinking about, there's a pro-life bank. That's like what they're called, pro-life bank. And I've seen some other ads on some other videos for family savings bank type things. And there are banks that have things, and they'll tend to focus on things like collateralized loans, because that's a safer, more responsible way to borrow money. But we do need to have ways for people to borrow money. And especially, one of the injustices, I would say, of our system is that rich, well-to-do people have good credit and get lower interest rates than poor people, which, is because of their risk factor. But this means that it's very hard for poor people to start, or a poor person who buys a car or a house, and they get to the point where they can make that, and it's a big financial purchase, but then they're paying significantly on top. They end up paying so much more than the wealthy person would for the same thing because of the risk of the poor. And that's something, you would say that is a sort of social injustice. So how would a Christian, not just a Christian bank, but like how would a Christian credit reporting agency work? Because the banks all use the same credit reporting agencies, which tell them who are the most reliable earners of money for the banks. And a Christian system would do things differently, I think. Would it, and I don't know exactly how it would work. This is something people need to think of, because would it, for example, it might value more somebody who once did some very unwise things and then learned from their mistake and, has not, like my friend or something, somebody who maxed out credit cards as a young person, paid them off, learned their mistake, and now doesn't use them, but they would have a low credit rating. They should have a very high credit rating. When they need a loan, they should get preference for it. And this gets into more of these dicey topics, because it could easily become some sort of a social credit score type system, which we don't want. We don't want a government being in control of that, like in China. You certainly don't want a secular government dictating your worth as a person based on a bunch of metrics. But those things would be factors, because if you are a member in good standing at a church for a long time, and people talk about your willingness to work hard, that your work ethic, your reliability, your faithfulness, your generosity, like if you were giving faithfully, would that be, if you think about this, people who are constantly managing debt are paying a specific amount to credit companies reliably in interest and finance fees every month, but which gives them a good credit rating. But if you faithfully give to your church every week or every month, shouldn't that, in a sense, also show a financial responsibility and reliability? And what's more, that's something that a person does voluntarily. Unlike, with the credit card company, you can volunteer to not pay, but you're saying screw my credit card rate, my credit score, when you choose to not pay. So these are just some thoughts in one specific little sliver of life, and I think they're the sorts of things we just really need to stop and think about in great detail. And the best thing, I think, would be, as much as we can, if we could find better solutions that we could implement now and start companies and institutions now that could do these, then you have competition in a free market space until lawfare is used against you, which it might if you're too successful. And it also gives a backup if these primary institutions fail or collapse, which they might. And right now we have what looks like a collapsing of most small banks into larger banks. So if people are going to start new small banks, they should do it in a way that is different to protect them from the eventuality of that collapse. Most of that is like the fractional reserve banking and the leverage of loans that banks are allowed to do is criminal, and it's wrong. And if you look into how that works, it's really pretty sick. So anyway, that's one thought for today. Let me know what you think.